enough papers, so.
Right,
Your nose just screwed up.
You can watch it. Right, home watching it now going.
They do.
I wonder if she left her cake report. I didn't see her cake report. All right, well, I'll try to speak,
Clear.
enunciate clearly.
That's the, it's not this building.
Well, I don't know.
It's like an alternate universe.
That's the old.
That's just-
Working. Got it? Okay. All right, now we're gonna reconvene. So we'll start with the roll call, which I would call Chair Zarowski, present. Charlie Fisher,
Present.
Clayton Haugen,
Present.
Harley Davis,
Present.
Ken Stevens.
Present.
And Hans, I don't know your last.
Fitchery. It's hopeless.
Say it one more time.
FETSCH.
Okay, Hans, present. Okay, so yeah, here we are. So the first thing on our agenda tonight is Friendly Acres Homeowners Association. Hopefully we can include this application tonight. So if you guys want to come up, we don't need all of this, whoever. I don't think we'll have too much back and forth to do. So where we're at on this is, I was away at the last meeting, but we had the public hearing. So we heard from the public, said different things. The public hearing was opened and then closed. We also did a seeker determination. So that's also done. So all that's really left for us is to discuss amongst the board and make a determination about what we want to do here. So unless you guys have anything new or anything that you think we don't already know,
Yeah.
I don't think we'll need anything.
I sent like another like letter with notes, to John. I don't know if you forward it. I printed out just in case, but just, I don't know, summarize our kind of notes.
Yeah, you can hand it around.
Yeah, I have 3 copies on the.
Well, let me see if it's in my file.
Yeah, I don't know. Just me here. Yeah, this is one of the letters.
Oh,
Are you covered?
so it's probably in the public comments.
No, I've seen. Yeah. I just, there was a couple, I mean, really. Just putting some pictures of the areas around, the neighborhood.
This is from email February 14th, maybe? March 20th. Notes from applicant, this one. Okay, got it. Okay. Great, so it's like just a response to some of the stuff. Okay, so thank you for that. Does anyone else need any time to look through that?
There was,
Okay, so the first thing I just kind of want to do, and I think that's actually what your letter addresses, we need to be really clear about, one of our mandates under state law is to really understand what variance we're asking for and where our purview starts and ends. And we should, in general, be deciding the narrowest question possible. So in this instance, my understanding, and hopefully the understanding of everyone else on the board, is that with the caveat, this took us a little bit of time to get to where we all understood it. It took several meetings and some back and forth with code enforcement, and then we had them come to help us understand. But basically, the situation is that we have a parcel of land that surrounds the lots that have residences. And the parcel of land that surrounds the lots where the residences are is vacant in the sense that it has no principal uses on that land. And our town law says that you cannot have an accessory use on a parcel if there's not a principal use. And the code enforcement office determined that parking a recreational vehicle, regardless of its state of being in terms of whether it's in process or completed, under construction or purchase, regardless, that the parking of that type of vehicle is a customary accessory use for a residence, but in the absence of a principal use, you can't do that customary use. There were several other questions that came up in the course of our reaching that understanding that had to do with fire code, building code, applicability of other state laws. None of those things are in front of us. So those things are enforced by other agencies. There's no variance to any of those rules being requested. And even if it was being requested, we don't have the authority to grant. So the only thing that we're looking at is there's an accessory use that the applicants are wanting to do on a specific parcel of land that exists in relationship to other parcels of land. And the only reason they can't do it that we're thinking about is that there's no principles. So I know in some of the discussions we've talked about like fire access, building code, things like that. None of that is germane to the questions that we have to resolve. So like the only question is in this very specific instance, and also the specificity is one of the other things we're really supposed to think about. In this specific instance, is it appropriate to waive the normal rule about accessory structures not being allowed to exist in the absence of principal structures? Is it appropriate to waive that in this instance? Is everyone kind of on the same page on that? I know there's like, if we grant this variance, they're going to still have to go and get building permits, like all that stuff. That's doesn't have to do with us. So we're not really giving a green light to anything other than whether an RV could exist on this parcel in the absence of a home or something.
Could I speak to that just briefly?
I'd rather have you not actually, because I think it's at this point, unless we have a specific question, I'd rather have just the board make sure we're all on the same page.
I just have two questions.
Yeah.
One is, what is the size of the, forgive me if it's in the file, I missed it. What's the size of the structure? I did go out to see it in between our last meeting. What's the approximate dimension?
RV is it's 8 feet by 24. It's a trailer that allows to be on the road, just a regular RV size.
200 square.
About, yeah. That was one, those two.
And the second one was, I did review the bylaws, and the bylaws do indicate that the homeowners association indicates that the vacant area is potentially usable as parking. Do I have that right? And are there any other?
But can I also want to interrupt on that? Like, I think it's helpful that we have the bylaws because it gives some context for the request that's being made, but we have that doesn't directly have anything to do with our decision. Like if their bylaws don't allow it, then someone who's a party to those bylaws could sue. But like, it's not a zoning question.
No, but let me continue.
Yeah, okay.
So there's eight individual homes in the area, right?
Right,
Right.
eight individual.
And the homeowners association, as the owner of the vacant land,
Yes,
has approached us for a variance for one single
Accessory.
accessory use.
right,
And that accessory use has been approved by your board.
right.
Yes.
And you understand that even if we were to grant this variance, that would not be open season that every other individual home could request
That's right.
a variance to use that vacant land, correct?
That's right. That's right.
To me, that's important.
It is.
Yeah, that everyone
In
understands.
particular because when, I appreciate that you presented the aesthetic issues that were raised at the last meeting. And certainly, in my mind anyway, there'd be a great big difference between, one of the phrasings earlier on in this process was you were looking for a variance to create a campground. And now we
Which
know
did
that.
never come from them, but yeah.
Right, because that was the way it had been interpreted, but now we know that all you're really asking for is a variance for one single use. Okay.
Right.
That's it, thank you.
Anyone else on the board have questions on the scope of what we're talking about? Okay. So with that, like very narrow question, I think front of mind, I'd like to go through these questions. I don't like to answer first, but first question is whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area. So if we say it's okay to have an accessory use, this specific accessory use on this specific property, will that create a detrimental change? Harley?
No.
Clayton?
One concern, and it may not directly be within the question asked, but when we allow this RV, or if we decide to allow this RV, then in essence, it becomes a commercial issue.
What do you mean a commercial issue?
The person with the RV is a tenant of the homeowners association.
Mhm.
He's not an owner
Mhm.
inside of that scope.
Mhm.
He rents, he's a tenant,
Mhm.
he's gonna be storing his item on that property,
Mhm.
which means they're receiving a payment for him renting, and then in lieu, also allowing him to store
Mhm.
the unit there,
Or whatever arrangement they have,
whatever arrangement, but there's still a monetary exchange.
or not.
In essence, there is, if that person's a tenant.
I'm just saying, like, whatever their arrangement is like outside of our scope. Like, in theory, if this tenant were to leave and then someone else wanted to come and park an RV in that same
As long
spot,
as it's-
as long as it's the same spot,
No, actually, as long as it's somebody that owns one of the homes.
right, it would have to be,
That's
they would have to
direct-
have permission from the property.
No, not permission either. It has to be somebody that owns the property that's requesting, that has direct say in the bylaws of that organization, in essence, I guess.
But
It's,
that's still not, that's not something that we could enforce, or the town code enforcement could enforce. That would be a dispute between parties and the owner of the property.
no, see, that's where we're folding in commercial code into this zoning
There's
application.
no commercial stuff.
But no, there's not yet, but the minute we okay them to be paid by a tenant for renting there,
I just
Okay.
don't think that's part of this question, because the only thing we're questioning is the land use and how that arrangement is made between parties is just like outside of our scope.
Clay, I'm trying to understand,
Okay.
because I know that.
and I'll
you-
explain, let me give you an example, I'll qualify it best again. You own a piece of property, okay, it has no primary structure on it. Harley wants to store his RV on there.
Okay.
It's not your RV, it's his.
Mm-hmm.
Is it still okay?
I see the concern.
That's,
I
that's,
see
that's,
you mean as a precedent for other applications?
we're looking at setting precedents and involving a commercial with the renter, tenant to owner situation. Okay, I understand it's 3 layers deep with regards to rent from the tenant to the homeowners association or whoever owns that house. But they're also, part of that rent is to allow them to store something on
Not necessarily.
I just think, hold on, this is a board discussion.
Okay.
So I think Clayton, I also kind of hear what you're getting at, I think. But my understanding and response is that any financial, commercial arrangements that exist, like say I own a property and it has a house on it, and my neighbor comes to me and says, hey, I think that spot on your property would be a better place to park my RV. that's no business of the code enforcement. Right, like, I'm allowed to say, okay, as long as no one's living in it, and it doesn't matter. If I own a piece of property, my neighbor says, hey, I've got $500,000 sitting here, I'd really like to build a house. I want to build it on your property, and I'm like, well, I'm not gonna sell you the property. They say, well, I want to own a house, and I want to build it, and I want to build it on your property. That might be a stupid decision, but like, I could let them build a house, right? Like, the ownership of the property doesn't.
I just had to get the question on record. That's
Yeah,
it. That's all I care
I think it's
about.
good to
I think
clarify.
it's
It
worth.
doesn't
it's
matter, it doesn't matter opinion, it doesn't even matter my opinion.
worth-
If I wanted it on record, because in the event that this ends up snowballing later on down the line
Mhm.
with several applications from people that want to store RVs, because now I have 50 acres of property.
Mhm.
You're gonna okay a vacant piece of property without a primary structure, or the board has the potential of okaying it. That means that I could potentially store 1,000 RVs on my property.
No, because you
Yes,
would
it
have to
does.
get a variance for each one.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
No, actually, I don't, because I have a primary structure on that
Oh,
property.
so that's unrelated.
I have a primary
That's,
structure.
but Clayton, that's unrelated to any
I'm just
decision we
letting
make
you
tonight,
know
right?
direction this
Right,
board
but-
has to
but-
realize that's the direction this could end up going.
But Clayton, just, I think it's important, but nothing in their application would change a decision were you to decide to do. So I don't think that anything here has to do with that kind of nightmare scenario you're
Right.
talking about. In the way that the law is structured anyway. I
Okay,
mean, there may be, as you may be intimating, you know, economic and other social things that say, hey, it's open season. But with respect to accessory structures with primary homes, that has nothing to do with anything that we're here. As far as I know.
So with all that, where do you come down, you think, on the, like, this binary of yes or no on the detrimental impact?
yes.
You think it does? Okay. Charlie?
Sure.
Mhm.
So. Some part of me says yes and the other part says no. Right.
What's each part? Like, what's the yes part for the detrimental impact?
Having, the structure without their primary building, that's more or less, you know,
And what part makes you feel like it's not a detrimental impact?
because it's just open land right now.
Mhm.
And you don't, during the summer you don't see it, but in the wintertime you do.
Ken?
I kind of agree with Charlie. I think that it does have some negative impact in terms of, you know, you are in the summertime, it won't be visible. In the wintertime, I did go to look at it. These pictures, I think, help amplify it. You can see it, but it doesn't jump out at you really as anything aesthetically that, you know, would to me, make a material impact on the neighborhood, which I think is what this question is getting at. There are other questions down the line, but, so I think I would say on balance, no impact, no
detrimental.
no significant detrimental impact, but there is some impact.
Okay, so I think I come down on the no side. I don't think there's a detrimental impact. I think like seeing an RV parked somewhere that you can see from the road is pretty common in the whole town, but even in this neighborhood. And so having one, you know, I don't think where exactly the parcel boundaries are in this case, like, makes an impact on how the neighborhood is gonna appear from someone interacting with it, either because they live there or because they're passing through. Do you guys want to go around again? We can.
Did you have an opinion on this?
Yeah, my opinion was it didn't.
Yeah, okay.
Sounds like our consensus is mostly no. Clayton's got it saying yes.
I'm saying yes because you can't be partial in this.
Yeah.
It either is or it isn't. It's binary. You guys said it's a binary question.
Right. Is it?
So
the
if it is, then it is. Sometimes is, it is. If it isn't, then it's not all the time.
For the record, I don't think the law actually presents it as binary. I think that's.
You said whether there's an undesirable change. We have to think about it.
I
You guys
just,
are the ones that said it was binary.
I didn't say
I
it's
said
binary.
it. I'll own that I said
Yeah.
it. I also think we can be more subtle.
Yeah, and I think the prior chair took that position.
Yeah.
That it was binary. But can I just interject one
Yeah.
question here because it's relevant?
Yeah.
When you were talking about the limited scope, what about the location of the particular mobile trailer here? Because it is mobile, and if you were to grant a variance now, would that variance cover if they moved it 5 feet, 10 feet,
I think
50
it would
feet?
depend how we wrote it. So we could write a variance that says in this one specific location, you know, then this is acceptable. We could also say, we could write something broader if we wanted. We said, you know, the parking of a singular RV anywhere on the vacant parcel, you know, is also okay. We could write it that way too. I think I'd be inclined to write it the narrower way.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion frankly would change
Yeah,
if
right.
if it was placed like within, 20 feet of the road and highly visible.
Okay. So separate from the yes, no question, I think our finding is, I'm gonna try to say something and see if everyone, at least mostly agrees, is that it's common to have an RV parked, near residences in this neighborhood. This RV, despite the fact that it's on a vacant parcel, is in close proximity to residences and is not, I don't know. What's the right word? It's not like, it's not loud, like it's not flagrantly, displayed. Right. Like it's not super close to the road, it's close to the cluster of homes. And that for those reasons, it's at least a minimal impact. Is that a consensus position?
Trying to see where it is in relation to the homes, because I don't think it's as close as you're indicating.
Yeah, let's check. Yeah. Yes, there, right. Yes. Right, so it's not super close.
150 feet from the property side.
Okay, so maybe maybe we don't say that it's close to home, but it's, it's not super visible from the road. And it's in keeping with RVs that are, other similar structures that are parked nearby to homes in the area. You comfortable with that? Or at least a majority of us comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable with, the direction.
Is
About the language.
that's the answer we came up with last time, right?
The majority sentiment is this is undesirable to the neighborhood and some surrounding property owners in certain seasons based on foliage and canopy. The view expresses that the possible negative impacts are outweighed by the positive impact in facilitating cluster housing consistent with town values. So it sounds like. Okay, so the board finds that the impact on the neighborhood character is minimal because RVs are commonly parked near and around residences in this neighborhood. And the location of the RV is not especially visible from the road or other residences.
It's seasonal. You can't say that.
This does vary, so the visibility varies through the seasons as foliage levels change. I'd want to say like, however, seeing a parked RV is still typical in this community. That sound okay? So I wrote, the board finds the impact on the neighborhood is minimal because RVs are commonly parked near and around residences in this neighborhood, and the location of the RV is not especially visible from the road or other residences. The visibility varies through the season as foliage levels change. However, seeing a parked RV is still typical in this community. Everyone okay with that? Seeing head nods. Okay, I'm going to move on to the second question. So whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than an area variance. Charlie, you want to start on that one?
Yes, there is other means that you can do it. Rent in the storage area, rent a storage spot, put it in, not have it on that property.
Okay. Ken?
We came up with a couple of alternative scenarios the last time. My understanding of this question is you have to answer it from the perspective of what the owner is seeking. And so even though I think Charlie's right, theoretically, somebody could, you could always park a vehicle on another, commercial lot or anyplace else. But with respect to what this applicant is seeking, they're trying to put it on land that the association owns already. And so I find that less compelling. We did discuss, though, that if the homeowners association had a primary structure, there'd be no problem.
Right.
And so that is an alternative. The feasibility of it, it's not nothing, but it would be feasible. I have no problem saying that would be feasible. They could collectively decide to build a home there, rent it out, and then they could park this RV and they'd never see us. So on that one, I think yes.
Harley?
I mean, it'd be one thing if there was like one house that stood out that had more property to be able to put it next to, but I don't see it being. Yeah, I'm a lot with Ken as well.
It's kind of split.
Yeah.
Clayton?
There's alternative means. Period. Once again, is there or isn't there? Yep. Are.
Feasible.
Yeah, feasible, what they're asking.
Yeah, I think I'm a little more, sounds like the board wants to say, yes, there are other options, which I'm comfortable with. I think there are, clearly, you can rent another space. You could build a primary structure. I think my inclination is to say, no, there's not, because, you own a home. You want to do a normal thing when you own a home, which is park an RV or have a shed or something similar. And it's not really, to my mind, like feasible alternative to put your shed in a place that you rent somewhere else, because the point of having a shed is to have it in your house. And I think the point of, but because it's an RV, which is like something that's not being used continuously, like there's places where you can rent out to park an RV to store it. And if that's really just for storage, that does make it feel more feasible. Whereas if this was like a shed or like a greenhouse or something, I'd say, well, you don't really want your shed to be in Kingston at the RV barn,
Right.
Whereas like your RV, maybe it makes sense to keep it at the RV barn.
The other problem with like storing it somewhere where you can do that, can't work on stuff.
Can't work on it.
Yeah. So I mean, for what they're trying to do and actually finish this project, you really, unless you were to go to somebody private, be like, hey, can I rent part of your property to put it on other?
So Harley, how would you, it sounds like you're kind of the most consensus, like you kind of, or maybe the most split. How would you write that you think you're saying you don't think there's feasible?
I don't think they're, for what they're asking, I don't think it's. there's
Ken,
too
so
much
maybe
of a
Ken is the
feasible-
most in the middle. How would you say? Because Clayton and Charlie are like, yes, there's other means, and you and I are kind of like, yeah, sort of, and Harley's saying no. So like, but I think you're the most. So what would you say for a finding?
Let me just talk this out. Since the application is submitted by the homeowners association, which independently owns, as I understand it, this vacant parcel of land that has 7 acres on it. If they decided as the homeowners association collectively that it was important to facilitate the very thing that they're speaking of, i.e. to be able to have the same rights as anybody else and have a trailer on the vacant land, if they simply had another structure that met code as a primary structure, and it wouldn't have to be much,
$100,000 at least.
$100,000, but it would presumably generate revenue. It was, yeah, I mean, I don't think that's, we're talking about feasible. I'm not talking about economically the smartest thing to do. I'm just reading the word literally as feasible. And I say, yeah, it's feasible, however difficult. That's all.
Okay, so I think I want to say as a finding that yes, there are other methods, such as, you know, renting space somewhere else. However, there are some mitigating factors such as in this specific instance, there like really isn't a, well, yeah, there's really no place on their property, on the property that of any of the residences that would work. And it's kind of a normal use to park and RV. So we can say like, yes, there are alternatives.
Only thing I ask is that number 2 on that question, or that we answered last time we read in.
Yes, we said the board unanimously agrees that an alternative is available and there are existing ways if the applicant's desire to resolve the variance. One example would be to store the homemade mobile structure at a location, primary structure or commercial storage facility. Second would be to create a primary structure under the current building code laws. Yeah, we can list both of those things that we think there are.
That's fine. It doesn't matter if we list them at this point. I just want it to be known that we did come up with that
Yeah.
collectively, the 3 of us at the last meeting.
There are alternatives to a variance in that the applicant could elect to construct a principal use on the property, or to store the RV in a commercial facility. However, the board also recognizes that in this specific circumstance, where clustered development has foreclosed the possibility of storing the RV on any parcel that has a principal use. Any the most straightforward option is to store the RV on the vacant land. Seem okay? So we're saying, yes, there are alternatives. But we also acknowledge that it's a straightforward solution is to park it.
I'd like for that to show that the 2 of us were not saying that. Never mind.
Well, I can say, however, some members of the board. You want to say that? Okay, whether the requested area variance is substantial. I'll start on that one. I think it is substantial. It's not allowed. They want it to be allowed. That's just a yes, no. That's how we've just looked at these questions before, because we did have similar type of question before us, the same board. with a shed on a vacant parcel. And said it was substantial because it's not allowed, so allowing it is substantial. It's not like it's only 20% not allowed and
Are we gonna include the percentage?
yeah, we can say it's 100%.
Because we agreed on that last
Mhm.
meeting as well.
Anyone have any other thoughts on that?
Just one, give me, but what's the size of the shed that you can put up that doesn't violate the accessory structure on vacant land?
There is none.
There is none.
Yeah, not for big one.
None.
It's just any accessory use in the absence of a principal use
Okay.
is not
There's
allowed.
not a maximum size shed that's allowed.
Thought there was.
Not in the absence of not in a statement.
You can't even put up a tool shed or an outhouse if you want.
Oh, no, my point is, okay, no,
Vacant
I'm
land,
sorry,
you
without,
Yeah.
yeah, with the certain.
So, thank you.
Yeah, you don't need building permit necessarily,
Right,
but you do
yeah.
need zoning permits, which is what this is.
Okay, okay.
Okay, so finding the placement and accessory use in the absence of principal use is not allowed. Allowing it in this instance would be a substantial. Would be a 100%, wanted to have the percent. Okay. Everyone go with that? Okay, number 4, whether the proposed variance will have an adverse impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood district. So this is, the first question was like character. This one is, do we think there's an environmental? Ken, you want to start?
I don't see him.
Harley? Right?
It's on there, once
What do you
again,
think?
number 4.
It will have an adverse impact. The property does not match the physical characteristics of pre-existing structures on this or any property and does not exist prior to zoning. What's the connection there with the environmental conditions? It's just that it's something where before there was nothing.
Ooh, yes,
Okay.
yes, you're dealing with forest, now we're putting something there.
Charlie?
And I think it's important to also include that there wasn't something there prior to zoning laws.
Right.
That's important to include in that.
Yeah, this whole subdivision, you couldn't make this subdivision
That's
today. Because it would have required the minimum lot size to be
And that's an environmental
larger.
reason for that.
Okay, so I also think no. So everyone except for Clayton says no. So I want to acknowledge what Clayton's saying. But I still want to say, because the rest of the.
You don't have to do that, it's a judicial board, I mean, it's.
Well, no, in our finding, we can still say like, while there is, currently there's nothing there. And this would be putting something that is a change, which does have some impact, but the board feels that the impact is minimal on the physical and environmental condition in the neighborhood. Wow. Is everyone kind of okay with that?
Yes.
Something to be. This has some inevitable level of impact. Board finds. Okay, whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, which consideration shall be relevant to the decision of the Board of Appeals, but shall not necessarily completely grant him the area variance. Yeah, this one, I'll start on this one, I guess. I feel a little conflicted on this. I think it's self-created in the sense that when the subdivision was created, they created a situation where no one could have a shed or store anything on their property. And I don't think they anticipated like a zoning situation where the town would disallow this kind of use at that time. But nonetheless, they did make a situation. Whereas if the lots were like 1 acre instead of, you know, what they are, whereas like a few feet on the edge of each house, then you would be able to do this without needing variances. So that's the extent to which I think it's self-created. I don't find that particularly prejudicial in this instance, but I do think it's like, it's self-created in the sense that the HOA made their own. They did the subdivision, they did the bylaws, you know, sometime in the prehistory of zoning of the town. But like the zoning law didn't make that problem, the way it was subdivided, to my mind. Clayton? I mean, what you had here was a self-created when the applicant allowed the tenant to build and store structure. Just like when they violated it,
It goes along with almost every application.
Right,
It's
most of them,
self-created
a lot of
in
them
one instance.
Self-created because there isn't, they wasn't there, they put it there, so self-created.
Is it more appropriate though to think of the hardship not as being like that was a violation that got noticed, but like the difficulty is that they can't, that they want to store an RV and have no place legally to do it, is like kind of how I think of the difficulty. I don't think that changes what either of you is saying, but it's like they did there was a violation in the sense that the code enforcement said you're not supposed to have this here, but like the difficulty that they were trying to solve.
I'll answer that question. If I ask you a question,
Sure.
who put it there?
No, they put it there, sure. I'm not saying they didn't do a
So
violation.
it's self-created.
Okay.
That's, you know, I'm just trying to simplify it, that's all.
Still self-created.
Once again, that question, no determination
Sure.
necessarily towards what we decide.
And we're all saying the same
Right.
thing.
The only time that I really have found that you have something that's not self-created is when the zoning laws have changed. Or in one case where we had recently where the town had approved something, you know, wanted to roll it back.
That's right.
So in this particular case, forgive me, but was there zoning at all relevant here?
No, at the time that this subdivision was created and the HOA was incorporated, there was no zoning law in the town. So like they didn't do it after there was already a law that said you couldn't store an RV there. Like, that's why I'm a little conflicted, because the subdivision predates the rule that makes the thing that they're trying to do not allowed.
That makes the subdivision.
But also they
grandfathered in,
like
But it doesn't make
the
what they're trying to
accessory,
do
right,
now.
yeah.
Grandfathered in.
unless it had been ongoing.
Yes. Thank you.
And that's why it's like that's why for me, it's a little sticky.
It's kind of self-created with a caveat.
But it's like, but they created it, like they could have still done cluster development and given everyone a little more space behind their houses, right?
Perhaps.
I think that kind of forward thinking that, hey, in 50 years, we're all gonna have RVs.
Or they could have put a shed there.
But that's why I feel it's important that we include somewhere in this decision, the fact that this stuff was established and developed prior to zoning code. It's, once again, I want to make sure we're closing that door for future problems. We are, by a judicial board, we're setting precedents here. We are, or potentially setting precedents that could be looked on in other values, in other cases.
We're gonna be very specific.
Have to.
Yes. I think we're all in a consensus. on
Sorry,
this
you
one.
also think yes? So, but well, maybe Clayton, you can say it. So it's like, I hear something like, you know, the applicant created the hardship in the sense that there's this subdivision that doesn't have any room for any storage, and then they decided they wanted to do it anyway, where they could have just decided not to.
Well, you can't mention the subdivision because it's not part of that piece of property.
Yeah.
Right. But the applicant's the HOA, yeah. Well, how would you say it? Like,
The property owned by the HOA
Mhm.
is a simple way to put it, because that addresses the other piece of property auxiliary to the one with the houses on.
so for the finding, whether the difficulty was self-created, we want to say the board finds that the difficulty is self-created, was self-created because the applicant is choosing to store an RV in a location not allowed under zoning. Zoning where other alternatives exist. However, or sorry, so this self-created difficulty is, or the degree to which the difficulty is self-created is mitigated, however, by the fact that the structure of the clustered parcels was designed and created prior to current zoning laws, which disallow accessory uses on vacant parcels. So the board finds that the difficulty was self-created in that, was self-created because the applicant is choosing to store an RV in a location not allowed under zoning where other alternatives exist. The degree to which this difficulty is self-created. Oh God, sorry, getting mixed up in my thinking. The degree to which the difficulty is self-created is mitigated, however, by the fact that the structure of the clustered parcels was designed and created prior to current zoning laws, which disallow accessory uses on vacant parcels. So it is likely, maybe we should say, like, it is likely that at the time the subdivision was created, the HOA anticipated that storage of that accessory uses would not be prohibited. Would not be prohibited by town zone. That sound fair? Like we're acknowledging?
Yes.
Okay, so we can run through everything we just talked about. Or we can just know that we all just talked about it and it's still fresh in our mind. And we got to make a decision about whether to grant a variance. So we've talked through pros and cons. It sounds like, well, so we answered no to the first question about undesirable change in the neighborhood, though I think that one was the most split in terms of how the board saw it. We thought there were alternatives that are feasible, but significantly less convenient. And we said it is a substantial variance request. We largely agreed that there was not going to be a negative environmental impact, but we did agree that it was self-created. However, we see that in a somewhat nuanced way. So now we got to decide what to do. Harley, I know you've started. Anyone not started? I'll start one around. It's all five of us. Do you want to start, Harley? What do you think is the right thing to do here with all of that?
I think with the amount that we put into this, and they put into this, at this point, I think just take a vote, especially with everything being fresh that we just discussed. It wasn't like a quick discussion. It was very detailed.
You want to just do a yes, no, see where everyone's at? Okay, so everyone okay with that? It's not an official binding vote. It's a straw, like a straw poll. Everyone cool with that? Okay, so who's in favor of granting a variance of some kind? I am. Okay, three of us. Who's opposed? Both of you are opposed. Okay, so is there any kind of way that a variance can be constructed that would assuage either of your concerns, or like, is there like a worse version and a less worse version? Like maybe you'll still vote no. Is there a way we can write something that's less bad in either of your minds? Like, is there like particular things that?
This is definitely got to be written very specific to this location and this area. Because otherwise we're going to open a door we do not
Sure.
want.
And this history too, I think is relevant.
Yes.
I think if we grant it, we're gonna be opening the door no matter what. Because we've denied other ones the same thing, accessory buildings. We've denied them.
Yeah, we had that
Because of
shed.
that.
Yeah. So
Redo.
I'll ask a question.
Mhm.
What does the zoning law say? What does the comprehensive plan of the town that addresses zoning say?
Is there something specific you're thinking of? I mean, it says you can't.
I know, it's a broad stroke pen. It says it's not allowed.
Well, if it was, but we went through this the last time, I think,
Yeah.
but in respect, if it was allowed, we wouldn't be here. They don't need a variance if it's allowed. We're
Okay.
here specifically to mediate the friction between,
Actually,
The
not
zoning
mediation, we're judicial.
oh,
But,
no, it is a mediation function between the law and its application in very specific circumstances. And yeah, we have to make a judicial, quasi-judicial.
What if it was a
decision.
shed? I know, I'm asking, what if it was a shed?
If it was a shed, frankly, the last time we had a shed, I was inclined to grant it. If you recall the very specifics of that instance, the woman failed to proceed with telling us where the shed was gonna be, what other alternatives she had considered, and essentially dropped the ball. And they had a very, a similar, alternative at the time where the owner had two plots. She could have done a lot line adjustment, and achieved the same end. She had two daughters and she didn't want to favor one over the other. So on that one claim, we denied it, but not because it was, so far-fetched that I wouldn't consider it. I know others, I know Charlie and others had strong feelings about it, but to me, that one wasn't an unreasonable application.
Yeah, I agree. I think if it was a shed, I think I feel similarly. That it's a normal accessory use to a residence. And to me, it feels like not that technical issues aren't meaningful, but it feels like a technical distinction that's kind of, in this instance, I feel like it's kind of obscuring a more straightforward question, which is like, should someone who owns a home or is renting a home, be allowed to have some sort of accessory storage function?
I have
associated
no
with
problem
that?
with somebody having storage
Right.
function if they're at a home.
Right.
On that property, which is a primary purpose.
So it sounds like there's maybe just like not a way that we could structure this that would minimize your objection.
It goes against the comprehensive plan and zoning. It says it's not supposed to be allowed. It's not up to me to decide that this is an okay law or zoning rule. That's not for me. My job is to interpret this based on what they're asking.
Well,
I
think
think it's,
what Ken said is true. Like every time we're here, it's because it's not allowed.
my point is, I don't care one way or another whether somebody keeps an RV on their property. It makes no difference, but the zoning laws say that it's not allowed. Okay, it's not, we're not asking for a small ask, we're asking for 100% ask on something. We're asking for something new to be defined based on this decision.
Okay.
It's not just a small minimalized item. This is something that's big. It's completely contradicting the wishes of the zoning code and the comprehensive plan of the town. That's where I'm drawing the line. It's not my personal opinion on this. Okay. This is an interpretation of this based on the rules that have been set.
Okay. Charlie, do you have any views that are different than what Clayton's expressing, or do you line up?
I say it's not because we've denied other ones. I know somebody else wanted to put a camper on a piece of property and they were denied.
Mhm.
They didn't come before us, but they were denied from the town, so.
Okay. So for the three of us that are in favor of this, clearly have the votes and we can decide, I think that's our obligation. If it's a 3-2 decision, we gotta make that vote. I think everyone agrees with that. So then the question is, maybe just for the three of us to talk about, what do we need I heard Harley, and I think Ken also said we should be very specific and narrow. I agree with that. Do you have any further things that?
Yeah, I one other thing that we hadn't talked about yet, in recognition, I think, of some of Clayton's concerns, although I don't profess to say it would address them. And the other thing about this circumstance is that it's a little, two things are different. The owner of the vacant land is adjacent to property that is owned by some of the principals of the homeowners association. And that to me is distinguishable from an individual who goes out and buys a vacant lot and then decides, hey, I got a cool idea. I'm buying a vacant lot, you know, on the other side of town, and I'm gonna rent out a camper. So to me, that is significant, as it was in that shed case that we talked about earlier. So I think that the location of the mobile trailer from its existing location as submitted in the application should not be materially different for any period of time while the trailer is on the vacant land. In other words, you know, I can't say whether or not it's moved. I don't want to be 3 feet, 5 feet, but I don't want to see that 5 feet from the road.
No, there should be, like where it is now, let's say these coordinates, you've got
Sure, this location. has to be
50
closed.
foot around.
Are we past the approval point, or
Yeah.
now are we
Bill.
drafting up
We're just,
what the decision's gonna be?
Yeah,
Because then I think Charlie and I still have some input in this.
you should.
Whether or not the board, if the board is in agreement, majority, that this is gonna be approved, then by all means, approve it. That's what I'm trying to get at. It's not for one person on a board, the judicial board, to make a decision for everybody. Okay, that's why we have 5 instead of 4, so there can't be a tie. All right? Before we start going into things like, okay, how do we want to develop this approval? What do we want to consider of granting this? It needs to be established that in fact it's passed.
No, I don't, I disagree. I think that we have the right and the duty for those of us who are inclined to pass it in the straw vote to actually articulate what, if anything, are the constraints that
Okay,
we
so-
see as being required
Okay.
before we will say yes. And that's what I was trying to do.
Okay.
So, I think this is gonna take a little bit of time to write, and I don't know that sitting here right in this moment and writing it is gonna be productive. If you guys are all okay, I wanna ask the applicant if, like, we've had this on your agenda, you know, we've been working on this for a while. I think we now are at a place where we can say that there's 3 members, at least of this board, who are gonna vote to approve some sort of variance, but we want to take our time to
making sure we.
to write it
cross our
correctly.
T's and dot
We can't vote on it and give you an official approval until we've written them. So we could maybe have these other people come up and talk to them, and we can stay here and write it, or we can adjourn the conversation for today. We have 62 days from when the public hearing closed. Does our next meeting fit in that? Let me be checking. And we could just like, now that I've heard the conversation, I can write something and then we can, at our next meeting, you know, edit it and come to final language. But if that's like really not what you all want, you know, we could sit here and do it. I don't like to write these ahead because a lot of times the nuance comes out in the meeting. It's outside of 62 days.
We have 7, 30.
Oh, because we have the long.
Yep.
I'd like to move forward and close it up.
Okay.
And I would say this, but I think that we can have it subject to, you know, checking with the lawyer or whatever. But I would move that we approve the application for the variance with the following conditions, restrictions, pending consultation with the attorney, if you think that's proper, sir. One, that the location, the current location of the
Accessory structure.
or utility, whatever, mobile utility
Actually classified.
You can say
as an RV, not be
as indicated
as indicated,
on map submitted
Yeah.
to this board. Okay.
not be materially changed, by which we would mean no more than 10 feet in any direction.
20 foot.
20 foot, yeah.
They go to
Okay.
turn, or
Okay.
24, if they go to turn it sideways
Yeah.
or move it, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, don't
Not the
be out there with a
material,
tape
okay,
measure.
material.
By which you mean no more than 50 feet in any direction?
24 foot long, so I mean.
Okay.
Okay, so 2.
Two, that the variance is granted with the explicit understanding that this variance does not in any way extend any right to any other member of the homeowners association to assume that they can park an RV on the vacant land adjacent to the community. That's kind of true anyway, but I'd like to say.
The right to conduct an accessory use on the parcel without
Seeking town approval.
seeking approval
No variance.
from the town. Yeah. Including an additional variance. Okay,
And this is my personal thing. And three, this variance is granted based on the history of the specific property and the fact that the vacant land is immediately adjacent to land, to property owned by principals of the homeowners association.
it's legal configuration.
And it's more of a rationale than a restriction.
Okay, well, so maybe we should say, write a paragraph or two on the rationale. So based on the specific history of this property and its legal configuration such that each individual residence is situated on parcels that allow for that individual residences are clustered and situated on parcels that allow no room for any accessory uses outside of the physical footprint of the homes. The board, what's the word saying? So based on the specific history of this property and its legal configuration such that any cluster is situated on parcels that allow no room for accessory outside of the home, and that the vacant parcel where the RV stored is controlled by the HOA. And what do you say? And that the adjacent properties are all owned by members of the HOA. The board grants a area variance allowing for the particular accessory use of storing an RV with the following conditions. I'm going to read that.
Can we put in there that the cluster housing was developed prior to zoning laws?
Sure.
And before cluster housing was actually cluster housing, so we know,
Before it was the goal.
because that might actually give us standing in the event that somebody else later on down the line decides to reach this. We're granting this based on the fact that they own property in 2 spots. We have significant cluster housing, which is great and beneficial. Then we have the other piece of property, which is adjacent to it, being used for the purposes that would generally be used for the houses here. Okay.
And that's one reason why I'm so insistent on limiting it currently to 1, because otherwise you would defeat the whole purpose of having open space and cluster housing. Because if they put up 8 of these things, I would not be perhaps in the same position.
Okay, this is not the greatest writing, but based on the specific history of this property, which was designed and approved prior to current zoning laws and its legal configuration such that individual residences are clustered in situation on parcels that allow no room for any accessory uses outside of the physical footprints of the home, and that the vacant parcel where the RV is stored is controlled by the HOA, which which governs all use of the land. And adjacent properties are all owned by members of the HOA. The board grants an area variance allowing for the particular accessory use of storing an RV with the following conditions. One, the current location of the RV as indicated on maps submitted to this board will not be materially changed, by which we mean no more than 50 feet in any direction. Two, the variance carries with it the explicit understanding that no other member of the HOA shall have the right to conduct an accessory use on the parcel without seeking approval from the town, including an additional variance. Three, that all additional required permits such as building and fire code approvals are still required. Can we work on this?
There's no fire access to that either. Needs to be fire access.
Now, all additional required burdens such as building permits and compliance with fire code. And fire code, specifically fire code are still required for any use, are still required.
Just one other one, perhaps, and I don't know what people think about this, but, so we're giving a variance so that they can, put this RV, this thing. What if that RV is moved? Does this variance allow them to put another RV?
Yeah.
In the same place?
In the same
That's
place.
exactly where.
It has to be, it still has to be an RV, but if it's in the same place, if he sells this RV and buys a different RV and it goes in the same spot, it's fine.
But then, but my concern then is that, if we can't limit it to this specific RV,
We're limiting the use and the location. So it can only be storing an RV and it can only be in this location. Which RV? We can't control that.
well, I think we could control, we could
We could limit the
we
size.
could control the size and that, and this is a hard one for me because I don't like going here. But that is not, how can you say something, we don't want something ugly?
How about the
You can't say that?
RV that's in the application,
What's that?
the RV that's listed in the application?
What do you mean?
I don't think, from conversations I've had with our attorney, we're only governing land use. So like, the use is parking an RV and the location is X. But like, which RV, we can't limit that because the use follows the land, it doesn't follow.
We're able to limit not having a shed,
Right.
not having storage container,
Right.
anything like that, by saying an RV.
We can say the
How
size of
tall
the
is
RV.
it? We're not agreeing to that.
I think
We're-
I think the thing that we can do that first, that places a bit of additional restriction is talk about the size of the RV. So he's saying it's 8 by 24. We could say an RV no larger than, 10 by 30 or something.
Based on square footage?
Yeah.
What about a fifth wheel? What about a RV that's with a motor? That's my point.
Can't be over 30 feet long.
So they'd have to come back to, or get another variance or adjust the variance or. Just like what if one of the actual homeowners decided, hey, you know what, I wanna put an RV here, and there's nothing there, and it's bigger than what it's.
So I said no RV larger than 10 by 50 or 500 square feet shall be.
I don't know how big RVs come, man, to be honest with you, I don't know, I'm just.
But I think what we're saying is like, if it's bigger than that, it's gonna change the impact and this variance would no longer apply.
an older mobile home was 50 feet long. That's kind of big. as far as I'm concerned.
You want me to say 52?
No, actually, I want you to go smaller.
Well, what he's got is 8 by 24, so we could say 8 by 24. That would be
I-
narrower.
I mean, I would give a limited, you know, a limited play on it perhaps,
Let's
but
say 10 by 30
10 by 30 is
or 300 square. Feet. How about that?
yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna read
Are
this,
those tiny homes?
and then I think we should, if people have edits, make them, otherwise. let's-
No, but I mean the gym.
So my super clunky sentence that I'm embarrassed about is,
Actually, your RVs aren't allowed to be over 8 feet wide.
Oh, really?
You can't take them on the road unless you got permits, after 8 feet,
oh, so let's say 8.
or 10 feet.
So what's 8 by 30?
You're allowed 8.6 before you need that, you go for West Park.
Alright.
8 foot to 8.6. is
Let's
what
say
it is.
9 by 30, or that would be 270.
Anything over 8.6, you're required to get, planned. So if you're.
All right, I'm saying 9 by 30 or 270 square. Feet. Good? Let me just make sure that math is right, yeah. So based on the history of this property, which was designed and approved prior to current zoning and its legal configuration, such that individual residences are clustered in situation on parcels that allow no room for any accessory uses outside of the footprint of the homes, and that the vacant parcel where the RV is stored is controlled by the HOA, which governs all use of the land, and adjacent properties are all owned by members of the HOA. The board grants an area variance allowing for the particular accessory use of storing an RV with the following conditions. 1, the current location of the RV as indicated on map submitted to this board will not be materially changed, by which we mean no more than 50 feet in any direction. No RV larger than 9 feet by 30 feet or 270 square feet shall be permitted. The variance carries with it the explicit understanding that no other member of the HOA shall have the right to conduct an accessory use on the parcel without seeking approval from the town, including an additional variance. 4, that all additional required permits such as building permits and compliance with fire code are still required.
I
Okay,
move,
all right, so Ken makes a motion.
I'll second.
Motion second, Harley. Okay, all in favor, or we want to do a roll call? Chair Zrowski, yes.
Hold on, I am confused. What are we voting?
To
I'm
adopt
moving
this,
to
adopt the thing I just read, the approval. Is that
Just
clear?
I'm moving to approve the variance requested with the conditions as just read back by Sam.
And it's, I know it's semantics, but is it based on the fact that the board approved the variance?
Yes.
What we're doing is,
I am moving that the board formally approve the variance with the conditions that Sam just
All
read.
right, so we're still voting on whether, then my answer is no.
yes, okay. So the motion carries, variance is granted. We still have to do a little bit of technical filling in and stuff before I sign it. But you should be able to come get it early next week. You guys are all done. Thanks for bearing with us. A reminder, you still are gonna have to, this is the variance for the use, but you're still gonna have to get whatever permits the code enforcement tells you.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you for bearing with us.
yeah, all right, thanks, guys.
It's a lot of procedure.
Oh, we have to cover the town.
Yeah.
As well as ourselves, make sure everything's done properly.
Yeah, good, yeah.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so
you.
much. Thank you.
all right, anyone need get a water, use the bathroom really quick? Or everyone good? Vacation? Yeah, right. Okay, y'all wanna come up? There's Big Net LLC. Good, thanks for hanging with us. I guess now you know you can come 45 minutes or something later. Yours, my business partner. Hi. Stefan? Stefan. Nice to meet you guys. Okay, so basically, I'm gonna ask you guys to give us a summary, but my basic understanding is y'all are trying to do some beautification. Maybe that's a word that includes some quality, but like we're trying to add some signage, some some sculptural signage and then some signage on the facade of the building. To just kind of like make it more reflect the use that's going on now and the character of y'all as the owners and operators of the site. The code enforcement referral gives us, specifically calls out the roller skate sign as needing a variance, and then they're also referencing the word skate on the front of the building as a sign. And then there's also a picture of like the corn popcorn.
Yeah, we decided to put it all in one.
Great. So, and they didn't mention that, but I'm assuming they're saying you need a variance for them too.
Yeah, well, then we need a variance. I mean, it's been a little bit of a confusing process, but they said we need a variance if the building goes over 100 square feet of signage in aggregate, like regardless of how many tenants there are. So if one thing puts us over that, then everything falls into the over the variance. And it should be noted that the building has had signage on it since it opened, as far as I know. At least 300 square feet.
Yeah. So you're saying that there's like,
It's been in violation the entire time.
right, and okay.
Unless of course, when it opened,
There was some
codes
sort
were
of
different, I don't know. Somebody on the planning board told me it was supposed to be temporary, that signage, I don't know what that was about. But as
there's
far as I
been-
can tell, it's always been.
Okay. So, but basically what we're saying is, what code enforcement is saying is there's sort of three distinct instances of signage. There's a variance required sort of for the aggregate of all of it, like there's a limit on the total aggregate signing.
Except for roller skate, which is not on the building, and that has its own aggregate amount, which I
Oh, really?
believe in the new code is.
The new code's not approved yet, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
so might be 80 square feet or something. I'm not sure.
Okay. Right. Let me see. So, okay, so this is, I think, just to like say this, I think our signage code is one of the most confusing sections of the code to even understand what it's saying. So I think like our first duty, first we just want to make sure we understand what y'all are trying to do and why. Which we'll let you talk about that a little bit more. But then the second thing is I think we should all get on the same page about what the zoning code says is allowed and in what ways what they're asking to do is in excess of what's allowed. I think it's clear that it is in excess of what's allowed, but exactly, I think there's like maybe a few different points where that what you're asking to do requires a variance. I think it's probably not going to be just like one thing. So does that make sense to everyone? Like first, let's hear exactly what they want to do, make sure we understand it, why, and then try to all understand the places where there's a variance. Everyone cool with that? All right, silence is consent only in this instance. Okay, so will you just like walk us through quickly?
Sure,
We've got pictures.
I think that, I think I'll start with the signage in the front of the building, which is our proposal for the signage, which does not include our brand, which is Skate Time. It's just a artistic representation of the word skate, where the A-frame of the entrance of the building is used as the A's. I think that is enough to let people know that it is a skate rink itself. The roller skate is something that we thought was a great tie-in to the area, because we already have Noam Chomsky down the road, and it kind of builds on that that history. And it was also a project that was we raised some money for it through the community, and so people were putting in some money. We were creating some excitement there, and then on the Bjornkorn side, to kind of match the nature of the building, we thought it would be nice to have a little bit of artwork there as well.
Okay. And then, so the process that you guys, can you just also walk us through the interactions you've had so far
Sure.
with these requests?
Early on, Jerry, had,
Code enforcement, yeah.
code enforcement, determined that the roller skate, because at the beginning I was just submitting the roller skate. Determined that it was a sculpture and, then passed it on to the planning board, and the planning board was a bit flummoxed as to what to do from there. And they kicked it back to Jerry for redetermination. And then after probably some internal conversation, Jerry determined that it was signage and that all artwork is signage, or whether it's sculpture or a mural or whatever. And that therefore it was not in the jurisdiction of the planning board because it was already in violation of code and needed to go to the zoning board of appeals as the next
Okay,
step.
so the planning board there was nothing issued by the planning board. They just kind of kicked it back to code enforcement and now it's come to us.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone on this board have any questions about anything so far?
Yeah, we want, did they say that this should fall under one application or two, one based on the roller skate and one based on the signage in front of the building on the side?
They urged me to make it all one. In fact, I was rushing to get Jasmine the popcorn thing on Friday just to make sure that it got into there. So that's.
Okay. Yes, I think, thank you for that. That's helpful. So one of the first things that our board has the responsibility of doing is kind of determining as presented what's the scope of this variance. So that part's a little tricky, and I think it's going to involve some interpretation on our part of what applies and what doesn't, and then to what extent what they're asking to do is in excess of the things that apply. So first thing I just want to do, kind of want to, because I'm frankly a little overwhelmed by the interlocking technicalities of the sign code, I think it would just be helpful for us all to review it step by step, and kind of flag the places that we think are applicable. And for me, I think I'd like to start with just the definition that the town has of sign. So I'm looking on E-code. It looks like some of you have your printed versions, but I'm in the 140-4 specific definitions. So any device, facade, fixture, material, placard, or structure that uses any color, form, graphic, picture, illumination, symbol, or writing to advertise, announce, declare, or identify a purpose or entity, or to communicate information of any kind to the public outside of the building, including neon or fluorescent, painted building outlines, and similar devices.
Which is that?
That's the definition of the word sign in 140-4. Yeah. It's the first part of the code. It's specific definition. So I think, yeah. So for me reading through that, I think what that does is it just kind of makes clear that everything that has been submitted to us is in fact a sign, including the A in the A frame over the entrance. That's because that's not how it is currently, right? That's like a new. So that's also part of the sign because it's outlining. It's using paint to do a building outline. So that is a device. And then also just having painting on the side of a building that's indicating the use is also a sign. So I think that's like where Jerry's determination is grounded. It's like, we can't call it a mural and exempt it.
Right, so in other words, it doesn't have to say skate time.
Right.
That was the argument at first. They're like,
It's just a
Mark
word.
was like, if you just take off skate time and you're
No,
fine.
it's still something.
I would have said, okay, I'm not sure where I would think this point, but it ended up not.
Okay, so then we have, yeah, go ahead.
So you're accepting that?
Yeah, no one
That's
else has
that's
to-
It is what it is.
under, you're not contesting that. So it's not an appeal. It's okay.
Yeah. So then we have some different types of signs that are specifically defined here. We can go through all of them. I don't think that they're all applicable here. The ones that I think are maybe is business, commercial, or institutional identification sign, which is A. So it's a sign advertising a business or institution, identifying the business or profession of the owner occupant of the property. Commercial directory, I don't think that one applies here, because that's like if you have a shopping mall where there's multiple things. Contractor sign, don't think that's applicable. Freestanding sign, I think the state is a freestanding sign. Ground sign, I don't really understand the difference between a ground sign and a freestanding sign, but it's a sign rising from a ground foundation, not over 8 feet in height. So I guess this is taller than 8 feet, so it's not a ground sign. Incidental commercial sign, a sign which is on which is located a simple message directed only to persons on the lot, such as gas pump sign. So it's not that.
But hold on. It is, it says skate.
Well, I think what it's saying, the example, I thought that too, and then the example I thought was helpful because it says such as a gas pump sign, credit card sign, or pricing
Yeah,
sign.
it says gas.
Okay, off premises, that's like if you put a sign for your business somewhere that's not on your property. Pole sign, that's like a gas station sign. I don't think it's temporary, I don't think it's portable. The last one is a wall sign, which I think is obviously applicable here. So a sign painted on or attached flush with the structural wall of a building, including window signs occupying more than 50% of the window or door surface, and projecting signs not extending out further than 18 inches of wall surface. So I think what we have is a freestanding sign and 2 wall signs. Does everyone agree with that?
I think so.
And you could, I think it's important that we like get all on
Yeah,
the same
I
page,
agree.
because when we're going through the code, it's gonna matter.
So you're saying it's a ground sign?
I think so.
Yep.
And a wall sign, and 2 wall signs, because there's the popcorn one and the skate one.
Still think that it falls under the incidental commercial sign.
Okay,
Because, only because it does indicate purpose. Unlike you mentioned the gnome. Elder's Farm isn't for farming gnomes. And I know it sounds out there, you know what I mean? But this serves a purpose to direct, hey, what are we gonna do in that building? We're gonna skate.
Mhm.
Okay, we're gonna go to a gas pump. What are we getting to? Getting gas. You know what I mean? Maybe
let's see.
I might be misreading, I don't know.
I think that it's intended to indicate something of the scale that's not relevant.
incidental,
here.
like not.
I think incidental in this case means kind of like something that indicates a price or,
It's not really an
a
advertisement.
credit card sign, pricing sign placed in a window or on a door.
Like your open
Yes, I think we're
hours.
beyond
Okay, as
incidental.
long
in
as
this case.
I
I think so.
Reading that definition. Okay.
I think so.
Okay, so sorry, what do we say? It's a pole sign.
Yeah.
And a wall sign.
Okay. A pole sign, not a
Yeah.
ground sign.
Pole sign.
Yeah.
Because ground sign can only be 8 feet.
Right, and
And the entire bottom is in contact where this is on wheels or 4 poles, I guess.
It won't actually be on wheels.
I mean, it's a little bit abstract, but I think it's a pole sign. Okay, so then there's 2 more definitions that I think we need to look at. One is sign height and the other is sign surface area. So let's do sign height. So the height of any sign shall always refer to the height of the topmost portion of the sign from grade, unless the foundation is positioned below grade, in which case the height shall be measured from roof. So I think we all can look at the skate and say we're measuring from the grass up to the highest point. That's the height.
Bottom of the wheel to the tip of the thumb.
And that's indicated as 12 feet on the designs, right? So no one has any qualms about that. Sign surface area. This one I think needs a little more parsing. So the size of any sign computed by multiplying its greatest length, by its greatest height. Sign supports or foundations not bearing advertising material shall not be included. The surface area of the signs with no definable edges, for example, raised letters attached to a facade, shall be that area within the perimeter of a single line enclosing the advertising material. The reverse side of any sign, however, may be used without counting toward total sign area. I think each sentence of this has relevant information for us. So now I just want to go through it again, sentence by sentence. So the size of any sign is computing by multiplying its greatest height by its greatest length. So I think the size of the sign is 10 by 12. Right?
Okay, so it's not just the advertising portion of it.
I think not,
Skate
because I think
time.
like what you were saying, it's escape, it's saying this is a place,
It's got a purpose, that's.
but we don't get to subtract out
Right.
this part where there's nothing.
Right,
It's
the
just
void.
the height by the length. Everyone agree that that's what this is saying? Okay, so we're 10 feet by 12 feet, right? So that's 120 square feet. Everyone agree with that? There's no reference here that I see to, it's length and height. There's nothing about width. So we don't have to like factor in how wide it is. Is everyone on board with that way of thinking of it?
That may be a factor.
It might be, right? They have the code enforcement gave us a calculation, which I didn't totally follow how they got 175. So, or whatever they got 225.
Are they calculating everything together?
That's what I don't totally follow.
Might have been calculating it as a two-dimensional object, which
Yes.
is maybe just as the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, they're not
Okay,
supposed to.
so then sign supports or foundations not bearing advertiser material shall not be included. So that's, I think, what Clayton was asking. It's like, well, are we just talking about with the little part where it says skate time? I think what code enforcement's saying, and I think they're not appealing yet. I don't think we need to question it. And I think it's right, is like the whole skate is the sign.
Right,
If it didn't even say skate time, they could still
Exactly.
say it's a sign because it's saying.
Still a sign, it's indicating skating.
Okay, so 10 by 12, 120. The service area signs with no definable edges. So I think now is when we're talking about the popcorn, and we're also talking about the word skate on the front. Shall be, so now they're trying to sound like Euclid, shall be that area within the perimeter of a single line enclosing the advertising material. So I think they're trying to say, like, if you draw out a line that encloses everything, what's that area? So for the popcorn, I think it's a little easier because you're just kind of like this. But with the skate sign, it's kind of like the highest point, I guess, and the widest area is that area. So it's like, it's really the whole.
It's not each one calculated and added together.
That's
It'll
what
be
it's
the
saying.
entire service.
Right. It's like if you had to cut out the sign and like pick it up and move it somewhere, how much would you have to?
So
Okay.
we don't know those dimensions.
We have those dimensions in. And then this is the last sentence that I think, so we're all agreeing the skate is 10 feet by 12 feet. It's 12 feet high, 10 feet long. The popcorn sign and the skate sign are also just like height by length. We just figure out, or we trust the measurements, given to us, and that's the size. So we're not like just counting each kernel of popcorn, and we're not counting just the letters and the whole thing. And then the last sentence here is the reverse side of any sign, however, may be used without counting towards total sign area. So that's one that I think we need to like think about for a second with regard to the skate. My interpretation of that is we just do 10 by 12. We're not counting two sides. It's just, it's 120 square feet. It's a three-dimensional object, but this to me is saying you can have two-sided signs and you don't double count.
Yeah, every sign would be a three-dimensional object.
Right.
If it has two sides.
Okay.
It's.
So we're all comfortable with like all of those conclusions that the skate is 10 feet by 12 feet. And then I don't have the dimensions of the other ones, but like that's the size there. Everyone good with all that?
I'm a little still going back to as a hole or a ground, it's neither really to me. And I don't know if that would be relevant in how
Yeah, I
I
don't
might
know if it's
vote on
relevant,
a
so that's the
variance,
next question.
but it's not because a pole sign has a different aesthetic impact and a
That's
visual
right.
impact that I think the law is concerned about.
So maybe that we need to think about more if it becomes relevant. Okay, so now I'd like to go to the actual regulation about signs, which is 140-21. This also, I think, has like a lot of self-referential logic. So just section A, purpose is to help residents and visitors find what they need without difficulty, improve the appearance of the town, and promote public safety. I think like that purpose might be something we need to keep checking in with. while we're thinking about this, because I think any way we slice it, we're talking about like a very large variance from what the code allows. So this purpose, I think is going to be important for us to think about. So I just want to flag that. So to help residents and visitors find what they need without difficulty, improve the appearance and promote public safety by regulating sign construction. Okay, application, signs shall meet the standards attached in this chart, where you're supposed to get permits. I don't think there's anybody really having any issues with that. Some things you have to get a permit from the planning board. We determined that's already been determined not to apply. So then C, this is about discretionary signs, where the planning board needs to approve things. So in the chart that's further down in this regulation, some signs are categorized as discretionary, and then the planning board is supposed to review them based on these characteristics. So we're not being asked to think about these things, though I do think it might be good to just like see what they are. So not interfere with views. You should combine signs to avoid clutter. So I think that's like with strip malls, they don't want 10 signs, one for each store. They'd rather have a custom sign close to the ground. They should be designed to, you know, be aesthetically pleasing, not interfere with lines of sight. They should achieve ready visibility without becoming a distraction. And they should be landscaped around the sign base. Discretionary signs. And then D is general regulations that apply to all signs. So you're not supposed to have signs that project beyond the walls or too far out from the buildings that are attached from. They have to be at least 5 feet back from the front and side lot lines. They have to be less, whatever the distance of the sign is from the property line, you have to be no more than half that height. I don't think there's a conflict here with that. They should not be designed to appear as a public safety warning or traffic sign. Can't put them on a utility pole. Traffic signs are exempt. You're not supposed to have internally lighted signs unless they're steadily lit, which doesn't apply here. And then if it's in the Catskill Park, you need special permits. Non-conforming signs, so this is like maybe a little bit relevant. Existing non-conforming signs may be repaired or reconstructed, but not be relocated or increased except as provided herein. A non-conforming sign shall be considered a non-conforming structure. Sign maintenance, you're supposed to maintain them so that they don't become useless. So now we have this really fun chart. So we have the prohibited signs, signs allowed with no permit, so you can just do it, you don't have to ask. Signs where you need a permit. And then there's just maximum sign areas allowed for freestanding and wall signs. And then there's these discretionary signs which are permitted on planning board review. So here we're in zone B, the business zone. And every other district, right?
Well, at the bottom.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of prohibiting signs, which is like flashing signs, stuff that sticks out too far from the wall, signs that protrude from the building. There's like a bunch of them. None of these are prohibited types. These are not the kinds of signs that you can just do without a permit. They are signs that you need a permit. So everyone agrees about all of that. So the place that this comes into play is just the area. So we have 2 different categories for area limitations. One is freestanding and one is wall signs. So conveniently not the same categories as definitions, but this is a freestanding sign. So 100 square feet in aggregate or 1 square foot per 2 feet of lot frontage. So there's so much lot frontage here. I don't think we need to do that calculation because it's saying whichever is less. So 100 square feet is less in this instance. No individual sign to exceed 32 square feet in area or 15 feet in height, with the exception of temporary and no trespassing signs. So apparently you can have really huge no trespassing signs. Maybe you wrote no trespassing on this. It would be.
Oh, yeah, right on the state.
Yeah. So I think with this one, we have this aggregate limit. So 100 feet in aggregate, that's like if you had 4 signs on your property and they were each 25 square feet, each of those would be okay, and the aggregate would be 100 feet. Here, we're saying no individual sign to exceed 32 square feet or 15 feet in height. So here we have a freestanding sign that's 120 square feet, so that's what, 5x almost of 32. And it also exceeds the aggregate by 20 square feet. So the aggregate maximum allowed is 100, and this exceeds the aggregate also by 20 square feet. Is that interpretation?
So if they were to get something that fell within that, then the skate wouldn't be an issue.
If it was less than 100 feet? Well, no, because it still says no individual sign can exceed 32 square. So it's an individual sign, which is too big, and it also exceeds the average.
Which
Everyone,
kind of sign are you talking about?
freestanding.
I'm standing. Okay.
Yeah, and that's in this chart in the sign regulations. Which is hard to read in any format that I found it. And then we have this other set of conditions, which is for wall signs, which is what both painted signs are. So they have this, there's like an if then, so it's 10% of any single building facade or 64 square feet per unit or lot in aggregate, whichever is less. So I'm not sure exactly what per unit or lot in aggregate means.
Maybe like a strip mall.
Yeah, maybe. Oh, I see. Or lot in whichever is less. Window wall signs shall not occupy more than 25% of any window. So I guess that's also if you have like a strip mall where you have glass front and you can't occupy more than 25%. Okay, so it's saying the biggest that a facade, a painted sign can be is 64 square feet per unit. So maybe there's an argument that there's like 2 units here because you've got the skate rink and you've got the popcorn manufacturer. But nonetheless, it can be no more than 10% of any single building facade. So I guess that's like, yeah, it's more than 10%. So we need to do some math calculations to get exactly what we're talking about. But either way, it's like we're talking about, I don't want to use the word substantial because that comes up later, but like it's not a small variance from what's allowed.
Percentage wise, yes.
Yeah. Percentage wise. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of what applies. So we've got 2 wall signs, freestanding sign, and skate. Is there information that people on the like that we want that we don't have?
With the skate itself, in the picture here, it doesn't tell you how far from the road it is.
Oh, yeah.
There's another
There's
one.
another one.
It's
There's a-
70-something feet.
Yeah, right
Yeah.
there. You just had.
Yeah, that's from the center of the intersection.
Now, I guess the calculations, I mean, who's gonna determine that, the square footage of the advertising? Because the reason I ask that is if you take into account the A extends really, not really high to me, I'm not climbing up there. But if you take that distance across the top of that, now it's exceeding the top of the building by say 10 feet. I don't know the exact measurement. So now that square footage goes all the way out.
Yes, that's the way it is.
Yeah, so climbing up there.
Yeah, I don't think we need to climb up there. You can use an iPhone.
Sticks out on it's part of the actual building.
Right.
That's part of the
No, what I'm saying,
Just for the number, just for the number.
Right, if you're looking at it from.
Yeah.
Based
It's
on,
so large.
length times width, are we going to the top of the A?
Yes,
As the,
I think that's what the rules
Yeah,
require.
I mean, I think, yeah, it's a little like, I find the language a little confusing. Like, is it like in this, do you have the picture, Charlie, of the?
I understand why they wrote
Yeah.
was the way
That one,
they did.
is there one
Yeah.
that's, do you have this one?
They don't exactly.
They got it.
Right on the screen. I think that, oh no, this is just. I think the question for me is like, you could draw a rectangle that's close. I mean, it wouldn't be a rectangle. It says a continuous line. So you could maybe go straight to here, then up over the A.
You
and then-
can't, according to the law. It has to
Yeah.
be.
It says a
a
continuous line. It doesn't say a
Continuous line,
rectangle.
right.
That's
Well,
what I'm
whatever.
saying, that's, but yeah, I know, it seems like semantics, but.
I think I understand, like you were saying, why they wrote the law.
And that's
that
why
way.
I'm asking, 'cause I had the same thought Sam did, are we measuring, it's line, it's not the
Within the
dimension.
perimeter of a single line, so it might be like a circle, right? It doesn't say. it doesn't-
How are we measuring this?
We can
We
decide,
take the
that's one of
face
the
of the
things that we can decide. I think like exactly how we calculate it, like like it matters the number in terms of how we define the variance,
3%.
but it's not gonna change what the sign looks like.
You could always
Not at all.
do the SKTE as 1 square footage, and then the A by itself is just a giant square,
Yeah.
which will cut
I
down.
mean,
on
I
the
can
whole
figure out,
traffic.
if you give me the measurements, I can figure out square footage easily, but yeah. Based on the law, I mean, technically, that's not even in there.
Right, right.
And I mean, we could get into pitch, like we're measuring a roof shingle.
Exactly.
So,
I was gonna say, how do you, in other words, how do we surmise a square footage in this instance? This one's easy.
Yeah.
This
yeah, I
one's
think
easy.
this one,
Really?
you know, I think there's two options. One is we make the rectangle that includes all of it, and one is we draw a line that's, you know, more like this, which I think would also be okay, based on how it's written. Either way, it's the same
As
sign.
long as everybody agrees that the square footage is this based on this measurement.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the things we're supposed to do,
I'm not sure. I actually think you're supposed to.
do the rectangle.
Yeah, I think that that's the intent, but it may not matter.
Yeah, I don't know. if
Frankly, it
matters.
may not matter.
Okay,
Because
so.
it is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. So one of the things that we're supposed to do is, like, we just need to kind of have the frank conversation that no matter how we define it, we're talking about something that's significantly outside the bounds of what the law anticipates being acceptable. And it's our job to try to find the best resolution for everyone. And one of the main questions we have to think about is, are there other ways we could achieve the goal that you all have, which is totally legitimate, of wanting to advertise and beautify the property and make it appealing to people and all of that. So like, I guess we should just kind of put it to you, like, have you considered other things? What were the reasons you didn't go with other things? Based on the goals you have, are there other alternatives that you've like maybe gone through and rejected? Like, kind of how did you get to here, and why is the thing that you feel that you need this?
Well, I thought personally that it's important, this is aside from the sign, the A-frame, it's important to make the entrance to that building more grand, because right now it doesn't really look like an entrance, you know? And so having that pierce the roof line is dramatic. Architectural thing to do, makes the building more inviting. And it was very clever for our designers to do what they did. So it almost seems like we could not.
How could you not?
Right, it's an opportunity.
Yeah, have we discussed other signage? Not really. We have a logo. It could just be a logo on the building, and not super exciting, and it is hard, you know, I've been driving by that building for many years, and it is a little bit hard to like catch what's happening or what it says, you know. I think Len had like a sandwich board sign out or something along the road. And had his sign with the light on it, and that is something we could do as well. This gate was in lieu of putting back up the road sign. Do you remember any other discussions about signage?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about having like a light board on the road, or this just felt to us like the most aesthetically pleasing version of like the various things we were considering in the abstract. We didn't have our designers draw other designs exactly, but we talked about stenciling on the Satan logo possibility. We all just got very excited about I guess the skate is in some ways at least necessary part of, you know, there's been so much community excitement around that concept, and we feel like it, you know, I think with the factory moving in there and skate time having the great energy it does around it, makes it feel more like a destination. And I think, you know, we're gonna have a lot of, as the factory opens, we have a lot of, you know, visitors and business coming up to check out the factory and have a skate. And I just feel like all of this makes it like a little more iconic, makes it a place that feels like you've arrived to a real destination without being gaudy and still respecting the surrounding aesthetics.
I'm shaking my head. Some people may think it's going.
I have to say, I'll reach the subject, because I know it's the gorilla in the room. That, from a person that's lived their entire life here, reminds me of Bemidji, Minnesota. Okay, and I know you know where that is. Bemidji, Minnesota. What's it known?
Paul Bunyan.
Paul Bunyan's Babe and the Blue Eyes.
Yeah.
Both because of a statue, and that's how that town or that city was defined once that statue was put up. That roller skate could have the potential of becoming the Paul Bunyan, which we have to be careful of. Honestly, we have to be careful. We do not want to create something in the town of Rochester that is not going to appeal to the people that are here and are going to come here. So while it might appeal to a certain number of people and it's exciting, the biggest ball of yarn, the biggest roller skate, you know, to have their picture taken next to it, it still has to be looked at as though it might be not aesthetically pleasing for some. Okay, something to consider. Is there other alternatives for this other than a large roller skate as the way it's presented there? What if you were to take that roller skate and put it on the building where that A-frame is and something like that? Now you're looking for a less of an ask for a variance. Okay, this is the fullest extent of your ask. Have you considered other alternatives that would shrink the ask, if you will, the size of what you're trying to define here?
Did you mean put the roller skate on top of it?
No, not on, no, I'm saying the roller skate itself, rather than being three-dimensional object,
Oh.
a two-dimensional object on the building. Then you're covering, it's definitely skate time. You're not going there to bowl, you're going there to roller skate.
Yep, that's an option. You could have one on each side.
Obviously, there's hundreds of options, man, you know what I mean? But my fear is that this could have the potential of creating the town of Rochester. Oh, that's where the big roller skate is.
Well, they don't say that about it, but no.
Exactly. I wasn't on the board when that came through.
I don't know if that ever, what the process was. So I think
No,
one of the, I think what we're kind of circling around is separate from how any individual people like feel about whether this is awesome or horrible or whatever. Like I think we can all just frankly acknowledge that it's a big variance ask, and our legal mandate is to make, find the smallest variance possible to grant, which means that we have to say, we're just like, it's a requirement that we say to you, well, what else can we do? And we have to try to find solutions that minimize the variance. Even if we end up granting a variance, we want it to be as small and narrow as possible. So I think like what I hear Clayton saying is like, I think what we're gonna ask for is we could brainstorm things and be like, have you looked at this? Blah, 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 and like come back to us. Or we can just say to you guys, hey, can you guys kind of sit down and come back to us with like, here's some other options that we think would be a smaller variance. And if they work, great, then we've like moved towards a smaller variance, which is helpful. Or if you come back and you're like, no, there's really not, like, can't do this, we don't want to do anything. Like, that's also fine, but that's that's something we have to consider. So I think like, there's some things like, is there any places where the scale can be modified? Or are there other ways of approaching the signage that might minimize, the total areas that we're talking about? Just because like our town code is pretty restrictive in terms of total area, and I don't think there's any way around that. And you're talking about sort of a monumental building and like signage that's appropriate, like kind of makes sense that you want it to be bigger than 32 square feet. I think another thing that is not strictly speaking germane, but like how would you interpret the area of the signage that exists currently? And like, how would you calculate what this is? And like, what's the relationship between what's there now, and what you want to do? So like, if you're just maintaining what's there, that's allowed. And like strictly speaking, it's not like that area is grandfathered in, so to speak, but like it is helpful context of like what's there now is this much area. And, you know, there might be ways of kind of framing what you're doing in relation to what's there now that maybe doesn't change the scope of the variance, but like contextualizes it against present conditions.
Yeah. I mean, it's 3 panels that are currently on the front of the building that altogether add up to 300.
They're all.
10 by 10, and they are, you know, solid colored panels, whereas this is a stencil that will be, you know, over. So if you include like painted area or colored area, it might not be so wild.
Yeah, I think like seeing, you know, like the way that stuff is defined in our code, we have no authority to change that, whether we like it or not, you know. But having that context can be helpful in thinking about what we're doing.
I think one of the challenges is gonna be because you were encouraged to submit them all together, that makes some sense, but in considering it, we may need to break down each individual piece of the representation and thinking in terms of what Sam has been discussing. And may come back to you with, you know, it's not unusual to have some back and forth from boards like ours and applicants like you, and, you know, perhaps there'll be some productive discussions. You have a design team that came up with this?
Yeah, there's a couple people involved. Let's see, our design team, Milton and Mike, he was on Queens Highway.
Carter,
He's done most of the kind of spicing it up in their ideas, like color palettes and whatever. So the facade was his team's idea. And then another local woman named Wanda, who did some of our stenciling on the inside, just, you know, she suggested that right there.
The popcorn stuff.
Stuff. And I don't remember who had the roller skate idea, but ultimately it went to what you see there came from this guy, Paul, it was an Ackford, who does like props for movies and stuff, and he works with this Vassar professor who also who does like stage craft, teaches stage craft and stuff. And so they together have this whole plan of how that would be constructed. So none of this stuff is stuff we're doing ourselves, but everybody is quite professional who is involved in these ideas.
That's actually a question I have. What's that? Sorry.
No, the reason I was asking was like, if, I'm not suggesting this necessarily, but if we were to ask you to have your design team come up with some alternatives, how much of a lift would that be? Understanding that nothing is free. Nothing is free. I understand that.
We're not supposed to consider cost.
Yeah, we're not, but
But realistically,
Is that feasible?
yeah,
are there other alternatives?
right, it
Yeah.
comes within that. And I'm just, you know, look, I'm just one person here, and this is really the first time I'm thinking about it with any degree of attention. But I would suspect that the skate would be probably the most controversial part of what you present. I mean, that's how it strikes me.
I
As
agree.
as the-
100%.
as the most
Yes,
controversial.
That's
And,
gonna present the biggest obstacle.
you know, because the extended A is almost part of a structural
Yeah.
building and, you know, putting more signage on your building. You know, people could have opinions about that, but, and it definitely does, you know, it violates the code, but that's why you're here, so, you know, that's why you have variances. But, this is like to be, in your rendition here, it's on Medica.
On the corner.
The corner.
It's like facing, it isn't kind of facing Medica.
It's basically the intersection.
Yeah, 209 and.
So if you're driving
Yeah,
that
209.
But if I drive, but if I would drive past, it looks to me.
There are some trees there, so there are various points where it is obscure. But if you were driving on Medicahans, you'd see it on your left for a bit, and then you'd see it behind you and rear. And then see it coming south on 209. You see it, and then once you pass the trees, you see it pretty clearly on the right.
Right. The reason, I'm familiar with the area. The reason that I'm asking is what I was just wondering is whether or not you could have something dramatic on the building itself and achieve the same purpose that perhaps could even be three-dimensional, could even possibly be three-dimensional, but not of the same, necessarily the same size and visual impact as this freestanding thing on this corner. And, you know, that has, I'm sure there's pros and cons. You know, you might get more visibility on 209, but less on Minnecahox. But anyway, that's the kind of thing that I was wondering about.
I also just wanted to point out, part of the appeal of the giant skate for us is the, like, it will be a thing on social media, be like a very like Instagrammable thing.
So I think, yeah, and it's also obviously in conversation with the no.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask what this is gonna be made, what would it be made of?
It will be plywood with fiberglass molded over it, I guess.
It's like the rest of them. There's a handful of skates all over the country.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty
Yeah,
common.
there is a.
I've been
yeah,
never
It's
seen it.
events.
Wow.
Yeah, we couldn't figure out if this was a world record or not, so, but I don't need to make a world record. But yeah, we did see other.
Yeah.
Are you going to be cutting down the trees in that area? Are
I
you
don't
gonna
want
leave-
to.
Okay.
Okay, so I think what
Some of them are falling apart.
we're gonna say, in terms of for the next meeting is, I think I'm certainly interested in a little more context of proposed versus existing. I'd be interested also in maybe some context, maybe it's from your designers, but like why this is why this is the best way to achieve what your goals are. Because that's one of the things that we have to think about is like, are there other ways of achieving your goals? And then we kind of also need to see that we need to explore together some other options. So it's probably better for you if those other options come from you. Because like one thing that this board can do is say approved, but everything has to be 30% the size, right? Like, and that's worse probably for you than coming up with other alternatives that would require less substantial variance. And I think that's like scale. There might, I don't know, I'm not a designer, but there might be opportunities to like think about some of the scale and not really change you might be able to reduce scale without having a totally huge impact on the design goals. So I think like going to your designers and finding out where you in consultation with them think those limits are is just like a way of trying to minimize whatever, we end up granting or not granting. Like the smaller it is, that it's a less of an ask. And that's our legal mandate, is to make it as small as possible. And then I think just like also giving the numbers that you think are the right calculations based on reading. I mean, we talked about it all here together, but like
That's the.
like putting in a clear, put a letter together that says, here's this, we think the code says this. And we all talked about it, but like, and then what percentage ask above, like kind of any framing that kind of defines what you're asking for
Based on.
based on the law. So like,
required,
it's
the
helpful.
maximum versus what you're asking.
yeah, because we can sit here and do all the geometry
that's what I'm
and
saying.
measuring different.
We'll come- 5 of us could figure out square footage and all come up with a different number. Yeah. I mean,
And I think, I'd say like really thinking about scale, and because what's going to happen is, we're going to gather all the information. We're going to kind of come to what you guys what's the minimum thing that you're asking for. And then it'll go to a public hearing, and then we'll probably have a lot of people from the town having a lot of opinions. And the more we can kind of like understand what the questions that we're trying to answer are, so like, what's the purpose of signs? Even like, how does this relate to our comp plan? Like stuff like that. If we're granting variances that are substantial, I think we really need to understand how that's furthering high level goals that the town has, which are articulated in the plan. You agree? Like, is that
I
something?
agree 100%. I agree 100%. My concern is to minimize without losing your desired effect.
Right.
Okay. And then we have to do that so that in a worst case scenario, you guys go forward and say, we want to go with this. And we say, okay, you can go with that, but that skate has to be 6 feet tall by 6 feet wide. And those signs on the front of your building have to be shrunk by like 82%. And that's not gonna be your desired effect. So if you can come up with a way that gets us closer to that number that needs to be recognized in here, that helps us to facilitate what you guys are after.
There's also some stuff like percentage of facade is some language, right? So like there's area language, but there's also percent language. And, you know, it often says whichever is smaller, but like if we can see, hey, you're kind of close on the percent, even if you're like, that's context that's at least useful. Okay. Oh, what was the last thing?
At least
Oh,
this
yeah.
is on the piece of property that John has a currently structured.
And I think like I haven't done this, but I would look in the comp plan about like some of the goals that you articulated, like having a visual identity that's appealing to people coming through the town, you know, being easily identified. You know, there might be things in the comp plan that speak to that, like the town wants this, and here's some ways of achieving it. Sometimes there's even examples in there. Like, I think, especially when you're talking to your design people to think about other options, like trying to link or using the language in our comp plan as kind of one of the prompts when you're thinking about it is helpful too, because then if it's like, well, we chose this because we really think it furthers.
But look at the new comprehensive plan, because they changed signage a lot.
Oh, then the new zoning.
Yeah.
It's still pretty
How close
restrictive.
is
It hasn't been passed.
How
And it
close?
doesn't really make this less of a.
No, it
No,
doesn't, but I'm just wondering how close.
Well, it's not passed. I don't know. They're still doing revisions. They're changing the map. I don't know. They're not, there's no vote scheduled
Was there anything in there about visibility, like
in the comp plan.
about the
In- in
signage,
zone,
like,
yes, there is.
like,
They want it to be
If there-
visible and easily viewable.
but if there were a sign on the back of the building, does it apply to that sign too?
Yeah.
It's
'Cause
still
there's just
sign.
still a sign on the
Yeah.
facade.
Even if nobody can see it?
Well, here's the thing, you're looking at it, right, you're looking at it two ways. If you put this, let's say you put that roller skate right on the edge of the road, at the end of the road, then it's a hazard. So yes, that would not be allowed because the traffic. Right, visibility in that sense. But if you wanted to float a balloon 3,000 feet in the air, that's escape time. That too might cause a problem with people.
Air traffic.
Yeah, you know what I mean? That's what they're looking at, I think, with these. It's not visibility for your desired effect, visibility of how it can impact people.
I think we need a gnome with
On a roller
skates
skate, man.
on a speedway.
Well, that, you know, a question of board, we want to be careful because we don't need what they just went through. We don't. Okay. We want to take this serious and look at it from both sides, aesthetically and from a business standpoint for the folks that apply
I mean,
for application.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do feel like, you know, the improvements to the building itself. I mean, it just looks like improvement to me. Like, I feel like it's, what is there is, you know, kind of, it's like it's falling apart. It's like this old agricultural building. And this, I guess one question I had as we are thinking about talking with our designers, it sounds like you're really stressing square footage of the signage. Is that the top priority that we're rethinking, or is it really more about the?
I think maybe some context for what this board can do is I mean, like Clayton was saying a lot with the last application, we're a judicial board and we kind of officially don't have opinions about whether the code is good or bad, whether we like it or don't like it. I think there's a lot of things we like. There's probably things that we don't like. So we can't like,
You know, the art.
We don't have to like it.
yeah, we don't have to like what the code says, but what the code is doing right now is it's framing all of this in terms of percent coverage and square feet.
Right.
And then there's some other stuff about goals. And if we're considering, like anytime we're considering allowing something that's not strictly speaking allowed, which is all we do here, we want to be able to root our decisions in the goals, so if we're saying, hey, technically this is in violation, but it aligns with these goals, and it's the only way in this specific instance. So we're like kind of looking at granting technical waivers that further goals and that are the minimum thing necessary and that are also specifically linked with a situation. So we're not saying like anytime someone wants to put up a roller skate, you know, they can. We want to be saying in this instance for these super specific reasons that are related to this property and this use, then here and only here is it appropriate. Or not waive, allow the rules to be varied.
It's great to hear.
Does that make sense? So like,
That makes sense.
I find these rules, I mean, this is just my personal opinion, it's like shockingly restrictive in terms
Yeah, like.
of, I kind of don't get it.
There's a purpose for businesses to have murals, like
Right.
Manuel's has a mural on the side.
Right.
Go to Rosedale, you see the roses painted everywhere. It's a wonderful thing. It is strange to me that that is an omission in this code.
Right, and we can't, like, we're not judges in the sense that we can be like, yeah, this is just weird and we don't think it's appropriate. We can't say that.
Especially in an area that is like this historic and artistic.
And I think some of that is like the kind of context, you know, that can be helpful, not in determining how big or small of a variance it is, but like why it's appropriate in this specific instance, right? So the specificity isn't just that you're on the corner of 209 and Medicons, it's also like, it's a skate rink, it's a building that has been demonstrated, that the town has shown up to say, like, we don't want this to be something other than a skate, right? Like, I think there's like,
Historically, yeah.
right, that's what I'm saying.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's like the specificity is always important in granting a variance, and like the specificity isn't necessarily just like we want the A to be this tall, right?
Not that it would be any different if it were Napa wanting to put a huge helmet with Napa on front of it either, you know what I mean? But yes.
But it might be a little different
It's
because
gonna
that's like something
especially
that's
once
a
it's public
generic
hearing.
nationwide chain, and this is something that's
A
Not-
unique
yeah.
Community
Yeah.
resource.
It is.
that the community voted to keep that way instead of turn into a town center.
Is it useful as we're thinking about redesigning to like prioritize like what is like the most important thing that we can't possibly change and then what we maybe could change, or is that?
Yeah, because
Yes.
our legal mandate is to grant the smallest variance possible. And what makes something possible or not is like what matters, right? So like, if we can all agree on what's important, it's easier to determine what's.
Right.
And we have-
Trying to do not exist, you know what I mean? But if we grant a variance based on a minimalist, you know, side of things, it may not be feasible or even wanted, but.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, because if the skate letters get smaller, then the A's doesn't look.
Right.
That's right.
Thank you.
The
But
All right, anyone else? Oh, go ahead.
One thing I'd like to say is staked out where you wanna put the skate. So I drive by there 4 times. Like I say, about 8 times a day.
That would be
So-
good to see it.
Yeah, so I can see, get
Yeah,
a more
that's-
vision of where exactly you wanna put it.
And that can just be like some low key, just like some.
You want us to
ground
put
with a
stakes in the
flag on it.
ground, just
Doesn't have to.
Excuse me?
You're asking us to put stakes in the ground so that you can see it when you pass by?
Yeah, yeah, so you can see about where,
The
you know,
location.
it's big and for
Just also
site
put a little
distance
like
and stuff.
tape at the height on the light where 12 feet is, you can do that as well.
These high schoolers are gonna have a blast with that.
Okay.
So someone's gonna live inside of it.
Do we have anything else that we're gonna ask? So you guys have a list of some things to kind of get back on this. And then hopefully we can have enough information that we can schedule public hearings.
Is there a timeline you have in mind for?
We can go on for years.
I don't think that's what he did.
You did get us material that you want us to consider for a meeting. You have to get to us like, it's like 2 weeks from now. It's like, you know, if there's stuff coming in and you're in communication with Jasmine, you know, that doesn't have to be super strict, but like, we don't want to get a big packet of stuff a day before, because then we don't have any time to review it.
and then we can't move forward on a decision until we hold the public hearing. And so
That's
from
the-
what, it sounds like we're
Yes.
not holding the public hearing next month. Next month will be more of a continuing dialogue, if you will.
The public hearing will be just on this one variance, or will it be clustered with a bunch of other?
It would be just for your application. Every application has its own.
There
So
may be other applications on
On
the
the
same
same
night,
Okay.
but,
You open the public portion.
Just
close.
before your.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then there's 62 days.
Right.
After the close of the public hearing, we have to make a decision.
So you'll have a
So
decision by then.
despite what.
But then-
There is an end in sight,
We can't go on for years.
as long as we get,
We
you
can
know,
go on for years
information
as long as we don't close the public. As long as we don't close the public hearing, we can go on for. Yeah, so it's in your interest to get us as much stuff as possible at the next meeting. So then at the next meeting, if we feel like we have enough information, then we can schedule the public hearing. And then once that happens, then there's, unless we get so much, sometimes you get a lot from the public and we like need to hold it open and consider more stuff. But you know, we don't know until that happens. Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for your time and consideration.
Sure.
Nice to meet you.
One question for you all, including Mike here. Are you guys really doing the planning board meeting on solar eclipse? Is that really happening?
I'm not.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, are you on that agenda?
It'll actually
Yeah.
be over by then.
I know, but I won't be able to.
Yeah.
Jamie was gonna go away for the Adirondacks.
Yeah.
Rochester's supposed to be like, they got 100%,
Yeah.
we're what, 90% here?
But isn't it gonna be cloudy?
It better not be, it better not be.
I thought it was gonna be a wash.
Doesn't matter, it's gonna be black.
All right, I think we should hold off on the minutes. It sounded like there were some edits. Anyone have any other matters?
Thanks.
All right, you guys ready to adjourn? All right, done.
Okay. Oh, no. Yeah.